Let's model a table that we can use to make all kinds of different tables. So we're going to begin in edit mode, and we're going to hit 7 on the number pad to put us into top orthographic mode. Move 4 to the right and 4 up. Create a new cube, move it 4 to the right. Well, I'm saying right, but I mean X. Now if we switch into object mode, we're going to create a new empty cube. We're going to use this later in a little bit to do something interesting. But for now, follow along. Now if we come over here, we're going to go and we're going to add a modifier. And the modifier is going to affect everything within the little group. So we don't care about the relative offset, we do care about the object offset, and that's going to be the empty that we just created. Now we select the empty, rotate it on the z-axis 90 degrees, and we have these this collection of cubes. It's called an array. Now it's actually 2 arrays, and you'll see the difference in the 2 different ones. One will be the one that we moved 4 in the beginning and up, and then the other one was the one that we just moved 4 in the beginning. When it's in an array like this, you can only really work with one of the items in the array. So you see, well, if we click there, it doesn't select anything. Click here, you can see that that's highlighted. Now we're going to choose to scale it. We're going to scale on the x-axis. Oh, okay, we had just the face selected, so we'll go back and we're going to hit L. And that's going to select everything connected to that face. Now when we scale it along the x, we put a number in there, 0.25, let's say. Maybe this would have been better to be a little thicker, but for now, it'll do what it needs to do. Now we're going to scale on the y-axis, and we're going to put in a 3, and that's going to make it exactly the distance between them all. So we now have this funny little frame. So you can see when you're in the user perspective mode here what it looks like. You see what's actually happening. But a lot of times when you're trying to grab things, it's a lot easier to figure out what's going on if you're in one of the ortho modes. Now, what I'm showing here is if you can select these faces and do things with them specifically, and that will affect all the other related faces. And if you hit L again, you will select the whole item that's attached to that face. Now we do slide them up. So now they're equal to the top of the other cubes. This will become important shortly when you see what we do to the other cubes. Now we switch back to an orthographic mode, but this is the bottom orthographic mode. Now you'll notice that the 2 items that we can now select have moved because it flips it. So we're selecting by an edge. When we click this edge here, and we're going to move it 1 along the Y. And we're going to click the opposite edge, and we're going to move that 1 along the X. We just simply type in the 1 and hit enter. Now when we move it back into perspective mode, you can see that we now have our tapered legs. Now they're very short and stumpy legs. But we're going to select the face. We're going to E extrude it the same height as the piece in the middle, and that will be 2. So now it's looking more like a table, or at least more like the type of table where you see the apron where it connects into the legs, and then the legs have a taper that starts beyond the apron. Now, if we go over here and we apply the modifier, we've lost the ability to be able to do things in an array, but we now have it as if we drew all 4 different legs and all 4 different apron stretchers. So let's add another object here. Well, I believe these are called meshes. We're going to add a plane. Now, if we take and we scale the plane on the X and the Y, I want them to be 14 inches. Well, if I put in 14, it's going to make them 28 because the scale is actually a multiplier. So, Control Z solves all sorts of problems. And we're going to scale it by 7, which the plane is 2 by 2, and scaling it by 7 makes it 14 by 14. Real easy. Another tool to play with here. See this little thing that looks like a magnet up here at the top? Yeah, that's a snap. And if we go over here, we tell it what we want things to snap to. The drop down should be showing us that we've got a snap to an edge. Yeah, I'm getting a little crazy with my button clicking here, but I've got a mouse that wasn't cooperating. So now if we want to move this thing, we do a G and we do Z because we want to move it along the Z line, and when it gets to where the edges match, it'll snap right into place. And you can actually do this by dragging instead of having to calculate distance you want it to move. Now it looks a little bit like a table, but it's a little thin since it's just a plane and not a cube. So what we want to do is select the face, and we want to extrude it and lift it up some. Now what we're going to find out here is I still had snapping on, so it was kind of crazy. So we go back a little bit, turn the snapping off, and then extrude, and we're going to go 0.75. Oops. Come on. Boom. There you go. We have a table, a tiny little table, but it's a table nonetheless. So now we don't really want it to be in those units, so we're going to go over here, we're going to change it from metric to imperial, and then we're going to change it, instead of feet, we're going to change it down to inches. Now when you do that, it tries to make it the same size that it already was, which would be a huge table. So we're just going to type in 14 inches for the X, 14 inches for the Y, and 5 3/4 inches, no, 4 3/4 inches for the Z axis. And we're going to scroll in a little bit. Alright, so now we have a 14 inch by 14 inch by 4.75 inch table. Usually when I'm doing woodworking, most of the time if I'm going to have an apron, it's not going to be a 2-inch apron. So let's see if we can stretch this up a little bit and make this into a 3-inch apron. now that we've looked at this from a few different angles, the important thing is that we're able to grab the parts that we need. So the first step is to go into X-ray mode. So now we can see all the different faces and vertices that we want. Now we go into orthographic mode and we select everything but not the bottom faces. So now when we do a go and we go on the Z-axis and raise it up by 1, it just drags that up. So now you can see that we have 3 inches here and 2 inches here. So now we have a 5 and 7/5 inch table.